Hi there, viewers. Today, I'm joining a conversation with storyteller John Lane. It's a pleasure to have John on the show. Hi there, John.
How you doing today?
I'm doing very fine. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this interview.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, John, you've had some of your short stories featured in anthologies. Could you tell us how this made you feel as a storyteller?
Oh, anytime you can get a story, it really makes you feel accepted. Like there's somebody interested
You're right.
to see your writing,
Absolutely.
and no matter what word is, there will always be a home for it. Because I would say the number one reason it's not about the quality of the story or the writing is does the story fit the publication, and I've been very honored to be blessed to have stories in several different publications. So I do enjoy, and my name's getting out there a little bit. So I know people at my workplace, they've read a few of my stories. I belong to HWA, the National, and the Pennsylvania version. That's the Horror Writers Association.
Wow.
And there's been some that read some of my stories. So just, I think that's the biggest thrill is that there's an audience for it and that people are getting to know uh, what the stories are.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the beauty of writing. You've been excited with the way people receive your work and people, interested in reading what you've got out there. It's always, fascinating to every writers and authors. Now, could you tell us about the kind of stories that you write? What are the themes that your works are mostly fond or centered on?
I write mostly horror stories, and I kind of like it where, like, the main character, main characters in horror stories, things usually don't go well for them. And so,
Oh,
like, it's kind of like the screws get tightened a little bit each time. They try to find ways out of their predicament, but in the end, that that's the predicament pretty much takes over that character. And I think that's the difference between a thriller and a horror. And it's not easy to write horror stories. It just seems that's where a lot of my writing, my instinct for writing goes to horror. But really there's a craft behind it. And there's a plotting and it's got to be some foreshadowing so that the reader can see what's going on. And especially I started out with microfiction. In
oh,
fact, which is I think it's like 250 words or less. That's the feeling that I get with microfiction. My very first story was about 4 years ago. I think
wow.
it's 4 years in August. And I was published in 50-word stories. It's To Whom It May Concern, and it's about a letter about God to His creation that He's not pleased. But if you read carefully the words that were chosen in there, it's kind of like an Old Testament God. So it kind of gives you an idea. I think to try to transcend what the words are, to see the meaning beyond what's on the page. I think that's kind of what one of the goals is to write a story.
Wow, that's great. I love your answer to that. It sounds to me quite fascinating. Now, John, I'd love to have your opinion about this. In your own idea and perception, what makes a good story? Are there certain features and qualities that make a good story to you?
Well, I love a lot of what's out there, but I would say that it's more than just a beginning, an ending, and the event. The conflict and the resolution. You want to start there, but there should really be something that really pulls it to another dimension. Let me give you an example. I like Todd Kiesling's writing. He's very profound in his stories out there. And one of his shorter stories, Scan Lines, it was about a group of people that have witnessed the suicide of a person. And near the end of that story, one of the lines he wrote is suicide, whether it happens in an instant or over a long stretch of time. And that is something that really stuck with me. When I was in high school, I knew someone that took their own life when I was a
Oh,
senior in high school, and that sentence really called to me. So that's something that really stuck out, and it's really hard to do. Also, I think sometimes how you don't have to necessarily end every story. Sometimes you can leave a little open-endedness to it and let the reader try to figure out, kind of fill in the blanks of what actually happened to that character. It's another good way to add extra dimension to the story.
yeah, I love that, especially the last point you made. It sounds quite, interesting to me. Now, could you tell us a bit about your story, The Time of the Night Watch? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the watch correctly. That was
But
published
that's
by
fine.
Grim Dark Anthology. Could you tell us a bit about it without giving much information away?
Well, that's fine. I'm very really privileged for Black Hair Press, and they've really done a great job of getting the lesser known writers out there, the newer writers, and they've really welcomed me in the fold. I've had several stories published with Black Hair Press.
Wow.
But this really, I did a lot of research for this story. So this story is about a really young king. He lost his father and he lost his brother in a peculiar way through a poisoning, exact the same way. He goes out to battle. This is all before the actual story starts. Some a little background.
Wow.
And when he goes out, he seems to fight these skeletal figures, but the battle seems all too easy for him. So he contemplates why it's so easy as he comes back to his castle. So I believe it's Cold Comfort Castle is where it's set in. And strange things start happening to him, and he can't figure out why. And at the very end, he learns to his own fate what actually happens. Grimdark is a subgenre of horror. It's more kind of like that. It doesn't go well in a very simplistic way. It pretty much doesn't go well for all the characters. They all pretty much have their own demise in there. But I did a lot of research for this story about the setting, about the parts of the anatomy of the castles. Also, a lot of the dialogue is in Middle English. So I did a lot of research on that, as I said earlier. But I very much enjoyed this story, and the editors really worked with me to try to get that to a publishable condition. So I'm very grateful for that.
Wow, I love the sound of the story. It sounds pretty much interesting to me. Now, John, I want to have your opinion about this. I know everybody have their own perception on how they address criticism, but what's your opinion about criticism? How do you react to negative criticism of your work?
Well, I deal with anxiety and depression, so it was really hard at first to get criticism because I was very inexperienced when I first started,
Okay.
and when I got uh, a letter saying that we can't accept, it was basically form letters when I first started.
Oh,
They were trying just to tell me, well, just the story didn't work, but I had a very tough time because I put an extra thought into it, thinking that it was something personal. It was really hard. And there were times when, I took a class and the instructor wasn't really happy with my writing, and that really set me back for a while. But now that I've had several, I think I have over 50 stories published at this point.
wow.
I'm a work in progress. I'm still working to get uh, places where they pay professional rates because that's where people really know. I mean, I've been blessed to work with Ghost Orchid Press, Black Hair Press, Black Ink Fiction. These are smaller presses, and they're well known to the writing community. Even Chris Fielding had a lot of anthologies that I was privileged to get published. In fact, one of them, 81 word flash fiction anthology, this one right here,
Wow.
this one received the Saboteur Award
Wow.
for best anthology, and my story to visit is in this anthology.
That's
So
great.
things are coming up, and I'm getting more personal rejection letters, which means that I'm making progress.
Absolutely.
But the last one, I had a story sent. It was a new magazine. It didn't fit the publication, but when you have an editor say they really enjoy your writing, that really means something. It means
Absolutely.
that you,
Yeah, I even love the fact that you mentioned that the fact of having rejection is like you're making progress. Is a good sentence to make. I love that. Now, I also want to ask you, John, how do you come in contact with storytelling? Is there a particular storyteller, novelist, or author that inspired you with storytelling?
I don't know if it's that per se. I did enjoy, like, I used to read Franz Kafka. I
Oh,
read some George Orwell and stuff, but I don't know if that necessarily got me in. I just knew that when I was in sixth grade, I had a teacher. I wrote a story, a medieval story, and the teacher said, "You should become a writer." I was in a National Honor Society, seventh and eighth grade, but I had a lot of things that happened growing up that stopped me from considering any kind of writing. And I didn't write for a long time. So actually, it's been my first story was close to 50, and I'm 53 now.
uh,
So it took a long time for me to be comfortable enough to not only write, but to put it out there. And I'm very grateful that I was able to do it. And I do have support. Like I said, HWA, Robert Ottone, Somer Ken, they're very supportive of my writing and the direction I'm taking. And I just I'm in following the different styles of writing. So that gets me, not only improves my craft, but it's interesting all that's out there. Like I finished up a few weeks ago Somer Cannon's latest book, You're Mine. And basically, it's split in half. It takes two different points of view. There was a relationship that doesn't go right. It's about witches too. There was like good witches versus black magic. But the first
uh,
part, I would say, generally takes it to the point of view of the female character, and she gets her demise, and then the second part takes it to the boyfriend that caused her demise. So it's pretty interesting, and so that's an interesting way to look at point of view. But I'm enjoying more of writing that's out there.
I love the sound of that. It's pretty much great to know your inspiration towards storytelling. Now, I also want to ask you, what's your journey like as a storyteller? Also, do you have plan of publishing a book apart from getting featured in anthologies?
Well, my journey, I would say there's some of it's a bit similar. That me want to go kind of a darker in my writing.
Oh,
So yes, it started there. So by instinct, just writing it that way, myself just naturally a little darker. But as I am acquainted with a lot of different authors in the horror community
yeah.
and some literary community too, um, it helps me tailor my writing and develop it. I recently wrote a story. It hasn't been published yet, but I wrote a story called "The Last Slice" about a husband who's once he's struggling to eat the last piece of chocolate pecan pie, and we learn little bits and pieces about the relationship with his wife, and
Uh,
we learn at the end of the story his wife actually passed away, and he knows that once that slice is done, she told him to eat it before that was one of the last things she told him, but once he ate that piece, that was the last that he was going to have of her. So yeah, I'm sure that'll find a home. But I'm the more that I read and the more that I learn from other writers, the more that's going to help me. But
yeah.
as your question about the book, I'm working. I like taking classes too. I take a lot of workshops, a lot of classes. I took Corey Johnson class in Pumpernickel House Publishing. She's very good. She's a very good instructor. And it's pretty built like a workshop. And I started a novel there, so it might take me a couple of years to develop and
Uh,
finish it. But I'm hoping to eventually write and finish a book at some point.
Wow, that's great. It's exciting to know your journey of becoming an author rather than getting featured in an anthology. Now, I also want to ask you, could you tell us more about your other stories, like the other works you've written, where they've appeared, etc.?
Um, Tell about my other stories. Well, some of the stories that I have in another one, Black Hair Press, is year 3.
Yeah.
And what's nice about it, they there's from Patreon, and a lot of these stories also get voted on.
Oh,
So what happens every month they have readers, and I actually for a time I actually read for Black Hair Press as well. They're very good. If anybody does want to learn about a publication, reading is a great way to do it. Reading other submissions, and it's in a group, so it's not just you voting and trying to get your stories. There's a group of them, and everyone pretty much has to agree to be considered to be published. So first, it's like no matter how many submissions, I believe it's the top 12 for each month. They have a theme, and every month it's the top 12, and then those stories that get published in the dark moments and the Patreon stories get into this volume. So I believe my 3 or 4 of my stories were voted enough to garner being published there.
wow, that's great. I love that. Now, what's your best advice, John, for those who are still trying to master the art of storytelling? What would you advise people in this category?
I would say I've been paid for a few stories, but I would say anybody interested, there's plenty of room. We are living in a great time that there's a lot of places to get published, like Black Ink Fiction. They do concentrate on horror for part of it, but they pretty much accept just about everyone because they want to give everyone a chance. So don't worry. I would just start out small and work from there. You can publish, like I said, Black Ink Fiction, Black Hair Press, places like that, and then start developing your craft. I would say take classes too, because that's what I've done. Read other, Stephen King says to read
Very
and write.
important.
That's very important.
Yeah,
We know what you want to be in
yeah,
what field, and then read the authors that are in that field. Don't read the big names. Don't read what's on the list on the top 50,
mm,
but see what the local authors are out in the field. Like
yeah,
some of the books that I have read are people that I knew, but I wasn't familiar with their writing, and that's what I want to do. I want to support those authors because you might need your support when you get your
super.
stuff out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your advice. I'm pretty sure the viewers, including myself, would love to utilize it. So thank you so much, John, for coming on the show. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
And thank you, Peter, very much. And I very much enjoyed your questions. And you have a great interviewing style. So thank you for having me on the program.
It's a pleasure.